It started with a tingling in the lips. Within a week, she was howling in pain with what felt like electric shocks pulsating through her face, with hot knives stabbing into her skull. And this happened around 25 times per day. But that's a condition so bad we want to save it for later. First, let's look at some of life's other horrifically painful conditions that often come with the word unbearable. Number 20. We're now going to start with what's called the world's most venomous fish, an animal whose sting is said to cause pain worse than childbirth. It's the stonefish, which doesn't look like such an aquatic thug. The problem with this little dude is it looks just like a stone, so when folks are walking down beaches where these things might be on the sand, it's very easy to step on them. If that happens, the outcome can be pretty horrendous. There's a reason they're sometimes called heart stoppers. Their venom is so darn potent it can paralyze muscles and cause cardiac arrest. A scientist talking to The Guardian about these little creatures explained how you get stung. He said when you step on it, that presses on the gland ruptures and the venom squirts up along the spine. Thankfully, these little blighters are usually only found in the Indo-Pacific region, but the bad news is they do tend to sting quite a few people. A handful of Australians can tell you about it. Once one of these things has stung you, applying hot water might help a bit, but in many cases an antivenom is required. The sting can definitely be lethal as well as excruciatingly painful. If you don't believe that a stonefish sting can cause someone to have a pretty bad day, this is how one Australian described the feeling just after the sting. My body was convulsing, my mind slipping in and out of consciousness with each contraction. I could hear my heart thump, 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 thump. Each beat was pushing the poison further around my body. I imagined my blood mixing with the toxin. She said it was very hard to breathe and she thought she was going to die. She explained I thrashed around dramatically for literal hours, teeth rattling, ugly crying. But thanks to some fast-thinking people around her, she survived the ordeal. This happened on a trip to Barbados, but back in her native Australia, she'd heard that if you don't get antivenom within 15 minutes of being stung, you're a goner. That's not strictly true, but without help, people have died in the past. We found another story involving an Australian accidentally stepping on a stonefish. This time it was a man that said within 10 minutes of the sting, he felt like someone was slicing off his toe. He also said it went from a sharp, painful thing to being excruciating. It was like hitting your toe with a hammer and then rubbing it over and over again with a nail file. I've been through pain in the past where I needed a screw in my skull, and nothing compares to this. With that in mind, we're confident that this pain is worse than the pain of childbirth. But when it comes to stings, the critters we'll talk about next are said to be the kings of pain. Number 19. There are some people in this world that say the stonefish sting is more painful than a bullet ant sting, but we doubt there are many people that have actually been stung by both animals. That's because actively trying to be stung by a stonefish would be a very stupid thing to do, considering you might die in the process. You won't die if you're stung by a bullet ant, but since it comes at the top of insect sting pain indexes, well, getting stung is not exactly a walk in the park. The reason it's called a bullet ant is because of the intense pain makes someone feel like they've been shot. One victim of a bullet ant sting described it like this: walking over flaming charcoal with 3-inch nails embedded in your heel, waves of burning, throbbing, all-consuming pain that continues unabated for up to 24 hours. Luckily, these critters are only found in Central and South America, so the rest of you not from those places can breathe easily. Believe it or not, there have been people who've actually gone looking for them and filmed themselves being stung. That kind of thing can attract millions upon millions of viewers on a YouTube channel. Still, we don't advise doing it. When a man who calls himself Coyote Pearson did it, you could certainly see that the bullet ant is a remarkable animal. He already got himself bitten by all kinds of critters, but in this video he screamed out in pain, "It's number one! It's number one! Oh my gosh! Ah, it's getting worse! Ah!" Number 18. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night and it feels like someone is crushing your big toe with a pair of pliers. That's what dreaded gout can feel like. The pain of gout varies in intensity and from person to person. But the word on the street is when it's doing its worst, gout can cause pain that will make a person want to chop off any joint where the pain is coming from. It's caused by urate crystals that form when there's too much uric acid in the blood. In some cases, it's down to diet. Gout used to be called the disease of kings because kings generally ate well and drank a lot of booze. Some foods contain chemicals called purines. These things are broken down by uric acid, so more purines mean more uric acid, which means gout. Let's say you have a diet that consists of tons of red meat washed down daily with gallons of beer. You could end up with gout. It's not that uncommon. Around 2% of people in the US will have this disease in their lifetime, a disease that can flare up time and again. It usually starts with a tingling feeling that can quickly turn into a living nightmare for some people. One woman who suffered gout attacks wrote on Facebook, This pain is off the charts, completely intolerable. The gout flare-up usually peaks around the 24-hour mark and can happen in many joints of the body, although the big toe seems to be a popular spot. It can go on for days, but not usually with the intensity of the peak. The scary thing is, an attack might not happen for months or even years, and then wham! One hits you and you'll wish you'd never been born. Gout isn't always the worst pain imaginable, but a particularly severe attack can be compared to the pain of giving birth. Okay, now for something that could affect you all. Number 17. You might laugh when we tell you that the next pain on this list involves a child's toy. Yeah, you got it. We're going to go out on a limb and say that stepping on a Lego brick can be as painful as giving birth to a child. This might upset someone who's been through the sometimes excruciating experience of that, and we certainly don't want to get on the wrong side of our viewers. But there's something you need to bear in mind here. You see, when you step on a Lego, the pain, though intense, lasts only a very short period of time. Can you imagine what it'd be like to have that unbearable pain last even a few minutes? What if, like childbirth, it lasted for hours? It would be absolutely awful. One reason it hurts so much to stand on a piece of Lego is the brick is so solid that nothing gives way. But the main reason is that your feet are one of the most sensitive areas on your body when it comes to pain. They are so sensitive because your feet send danger signals to your brain. Back in the day, the 200,000 pain receptors in a person's foot might have felt the ground tremble when a large, dangerous animal was nearby. They might have also felt a rise in heat when a fire was close. But in modern times, these sensitive things don't deal well with Lego bricks. They're not easy to escape either. Some sources state that there are enough Lego bricks in the world for everyone to have 83 each. Number 16. We're going to now talk about something that happens to a lot of people, and it's called a slipped disc. In a paper published in the U.S. National Institutes of Health, it says these things can cause severe shooting pains that radiate from the spine to the arms. It can be so bad that the person shows signs of paralysis. Basically, the discs act as shock absorbers between the vertebrae of your spine. But with a lot of wear and tear over the years, sometimes they can't handle doing their job any longer and slip. When they do that, they can hit nerves in the spinal cord and have you howling in pain. But it would be remiss of us to say any old slip disc is more painful than going through childbirth. But when these things play up, when they're at their very worst, the outcome can be horrendous for people. A sufferer on a web forum said he was on very strong drugs, but they weren't doing much for him. So he asked the question, how long will I be crawling up the walls in pain, unable to move without screaming? One woman replied, alluding to childbirth, saying, on occasions probably the most painful thing I've ever suffered. Yes, even more than that. What's terrifying is the fact that some women suffer from a slipped disc while they're pregnant. We'll pray for them tonight. Now for something you probably never heard of and you'll be glad you never have. Number 15. Here's a medical description of the condition before we tell you what it is. The acute vaso-occlusive pain crisis manifests as an abrupt onset of severe debilitating pain in any part of the body. That doesn't sound very nice at all. That pain is the result of something called sickle cell disease. In short, this is a rare blood disease inherited from parents. It means the red blood cells are not healthy. Usually these cells are round, but when you have this disease, they look more like a sickle, one of those grain-cutting tools used on farms. When this happens, blood flow is blocked to places such as your chest, abdomen, and joints. This can prove extremely painful. The bad news is that this is for most people a lifetime condition. But the better news is the pain only comes in bouts, sometimes called pain crises. The UK National Health Service calls them severe and says they can last up to a week. These attacks of pain might hit the hands, arms, legs, or feet, but they might also hit the spine, the pelvis, the stomach, the ribs, or the breastbone. Some people might even have just one attack a year or less, but others can have them more often or less often. According to NHS, one bad episode can be horrendous, and we mean crippling. We looked at the dedicated sickle cell disease forums to try and figure out how the pain feels. One person wrote, I say it feels like being stabbed repeatedly while having a migraine throughout your whole body. Ouch, indeed. Another person said it feels like having multiple fractures, all at the same time, and another said it was like having broken bones and glass flowing through my body. Some more descriptions included lines like a monster, seemingly a never-ending torture. You're being poked or stabbed by tiny pointy iron nails. The intensity of the pain is indescribable, and for me, it's like you're beating me with a hammer on my bones. Wow, that sounds painful, and it would be hard to top. Nonetheless, you will see that there are pains in this world that can cause a similar amount of distress. Number 14. Okay, this one is short but not so sweet. It's called peripheral neuropathy, and a doctor that treats people with it said it can feel like walking on razor blades. It's the result of damaged nerves that carry messages to the brain. When this happens, muscles might not work. A person might even experience paralysis, and of course, there could be lots and lots of severe pain. Like many conditions, it's complex, so its effects can differ and the level of pain can too. But when it hurts bad. One person on a forum said, "I have talked to 2 young women who are prescribed morphine patches. I had no idea that neuropathy pain was so severe." It's also been called unrelenting and severe, but all the pain is made worse from the constant cramping and loss of some bodily functions, such as simply not being able to pick stuff up. We'll now endeavor to talk about something much more gory. Hold on tight. This is petrifying. Number 13. It might seem strange to you that we're putting a regular animal attack on this list, but you have to take into account some animal attacks can be slow. We mean death can be slow, not that a sloth attack is especially painful. Take, for example, an attack from a grizzly bear. If the bear doesn't kill you quickly by severing a main artery, you could be experiencing agonizing pain for some time. That happened to a man named Timothy Treadwell. When a grizzly bear attacked him and his female companion, they both died as a result. Treadwell was the focus of an outstanding documentary made by the filmmaker Werner Herzog called Grizzly Man. One of the most disturbing parts of the film is watching Herzog put on a pair of headphones and listen to the audio recording of their deaths. Treadwell had left his camera on when the bear attacked him. Herzog looks in shock, listening to what is a sustained attack. He said after, "It's the most terrifying thing I've heard in my life." He later said to one of Treadwell's former girlfriends, "You should never listen to it and you should rather destroy it." So, what do you think that bear did to Treadwell? Well, imagine your bones being crushed between a bear's teeth. Imagine being alive as it bites into your skull and perhaps pokes out an eye or two. People have survived bear attacks and lived to tell the tale. One such man, Johann Otter, described in detail his date with a hungry bear. He said, "The grizzly's fangs sunk into my femur, and it jerked me all over the trail. It gnawed on my head, and I could feel flesh tearing away." Doctors later discovered a total of 28 wounds, including a claw puncture to my right eye. One of my top vertebrae was broken in 5 pieces, and I would undergo multiple surgeries, including a skin graft from my back onto my scalped head. Okay, so the adrenaline rushing through the body would have saved him from a lot of pain, but if the screams of Treadwell are anything to go by, being eaten by a bear can hurt a fair bit. For that reason, we're okay with adding it to the list. Now for something way more prosaic and not anywhere near as frightening, but my God, it can sting. Number 12. Peritonitis hurts. Ask anyone who had it. It happens when there's an inflammation in the tissues that line your abdomen or belly. This tissue is called the peritoneum. When it's inflamed, it can be deadly. This can happen by way of an infection, but some of you have likely heard it can occur when someone's appendix has burst. Appendicitis by itself can cause pretty severe pain, but you really don't want the thing to rupture. That can mean you might not have long to live if you don't get treated soon. With peritonitis, you really need medical help very quickly. One complication of it is sepsis, your body's extreme response to the infection. This is like an all-in-one part of the show because appendicitis can be really painful, but many people who suffered from sepsis have also said it was the most painful thing they've ever experienced in their lives. Peritonitis is no walk in the park either. It might start with a dull ache, but in no time the person will be doubled over in absolute hellish agony. Now for something we guess many of you can relate to. Number 11. You might laugh when you hear we're going to talk about toothache now. Ha! You think I've had many, but they're a mildly uncomfortable sensation. But the reason you say that is you haven't had a proper, hardcore, full-blown, I feel like jumping out of the window toothache. Here's how one person on Reddit explained her toothache. "I consider myself to have a very high pain tolerance. I've had my nipples pierced, I've cut my finger rather deep on a saw once, I've gotten rabies shots twice in my life, I've had chronic back pain for years, but nothing can ever compare to the pain I've had from this tooth." Once a tooth gets infected and inflamed and things start going wrong underneath it, well, there isn't much space there. This is one reason why these kinds of toothaches hurt so much. You can't relieve the pain, and anyone who's had one will know that pain medications don't seem to do much at all. Here's how another Reddit user described his infected tooth and the attendant pain. "The pain in the tooth gets so bad that just swallowing puts enough pressure on it to make you writhe in pain. You can't even think about anything else, let alone talk or eat." If you've ever got a really bad one, you'll know what we're talking about. There are regular toothaches and then there are monsters you'll never forget. Okay, time to move on now. Let's talk about the absolutely agonizing sports injuries. Number 10. Many injuries have been discussed regarding the severity of pain, and one that gets mentioned quite a lot is breaking of the thigh bone, aka the femur. It happened to an American football player named E.J. Henderson. This bone is the strongest in the body, so to break it, it takes some effort. In Henderson's case, it snapped in half, which caused him immense pain. News reports said that when his teammates saw the pain he was in, some of them were reduced to tears themselves. He recovered and in the end was back playing inside a year, but he'll never forget what it was like to break the bone, which out of all the bone breaks causes the worst pain. Number 9. There are many sports injuries that can lead to significant pain, and one is shoulder dislocation. It could happen while playing sports, but it can also happen at work, as you'll see. Some of you might be thinking this injury isn't so bad, but some dislocations are worse than others. There was a show on British TV called 24 Hours in A&E, and in one particular episode, a 6-foot builder went into the ER screaming like a banshee. He'd fallen backwards into a hole while at work. We watched every episode of the show, and we can say that we never saw anyone in so much pain. His howling was painful to watch. "Please, please, please," the guy shouted. That was after he'd been given 3 times the usual dose for pain relief. Even a person in the visiting area turned to her friend and remarked, "Oh my God, that noise." The fella looked pretty tough too, his body showing all kinds of injuries including a stab wound from the past. He later said he'd been stabbed, shot, hit with baseball bats, and had been to the ER many times in his life, but nothing compared to that shoulder injury. He said, "I've been in a lot of injuries in my life with pain involved," adding he might have had pain that was at a scale of 10 before, but this one was definitely an 11. But why was this dislocation so painful? The doctor said he'd actually dislocated his shoulder in a way that was so rare he'd never seen anything like it in all her 30 years practicing medicine. Looking at the x-rays, she was taken aback, telling the nurses this was interesting radiography. His bones were sticking into his ribs and in other places in a very funny position that she said it would be insanely painful. She said the way his x-ray turned out, I think, surprised all of us. Quite an excruciating pain of bone on bone being wedged. It's amazing what people can do to themselves. She explained that there are one-offs in the world of injuries and pain, and this was one of them. The funny thing she said is, if there's a male equivalent of childbirth, you've just seen it. To get the shoulder into the right place, they had to give him an anesthetic. After that, it took 5 people wrestling his body to do the job. It wasn't easy, but once it was over, the chap smiled again. In what sounded like a Cockney accent, he said, "It's embarrassing, isn't it, coming to the hospital? And you're screaming like a little girl, but you know, it was painful. Hey, I hold my hands up, I was in agony." Now for something so gruesome it'll give you nightmares. Number 8. There are a few things on a body that a man really doesn't want to think could snap or break, and one of them being his John Thomas. While penile fracture can be very painful, it is the balls that dangle below that can cause a person worse pain. By the way, if you don't want to break your Ron Burgundy, you might try sticking to the missionary position where it's most safe. Unfortunately, in the world of ours, there's something called gonadal torsion. This is when the testicle rotates, and that makes the spermatic cord twist. If that doesn't mean much to you, all you need to know is it causes severe acute unilateral scrotal pain. This can lead to a bout of vomiting, and it's something that will require medical assistance. It happens to one person in anywhere between 4,000 and 25,000 males a year, and in many cases it'll mean one of the balls has to be surgically removed. It can actually be very dangerous as well as incredibly painful. In some rare cases, it's led to sepsis and gangrene. One person on a forum thought he had it, so he asked others what they thought about his symptoms. One response was this: "If you had testicular torsion, trust me, you would not be on an internet forum asking others, giving a weak description of it. You would be rolling around in agony, clutching your berries, and phoning a taxi to go to A&E." Unfortunately, it can happen to anyone, and it seems the cause might just be down to the person's body. One medical website explained testicular torsion can happen at any time, while standing, sleeping, exercising, or sitting, and with no apparent trigger in those who are susceptible. If you're aged 10 to 25, you're in the age group that's most likely to get it. But we think this next pain is much worse. Number 7. There have been many brutal forms of execution throughout history, from simply sawing a person in half to roasting them inside a giant bronze bull. Historians now debate if that last one ever happened, but sawing definitely did, and there are a lot of documents to prove it. Historians are also sure that people were crucified, which even some Romans in ancient times thought was way too barbaric. Yeah, the same people that had elephants squash men. In terms of pain, it's hard to say which was the worst execution. Many of them were awful, but we think we have to give special mention to flaying. This is when a person had their skin peeled off, a procedure that was sometimes deliberately slow. This is how one person put it: "The peeling usually began from the face, with every sinew of skin being ripped from the nerve endings. The pain experienced is unimaginable." Remember that sometimes the objective was to keep the person alive for as long as possible, although some folks would just go into shock early on and die. That was a godsend. We can't exactly find out just how much it hurt because there's no one to ask, and it's not as if there are any modern sources that can explain the experience from a first-hand perspective. Still, We know how sensitive the skin is, and we can only imagine what it would feel like if someone started to slice it off. We have no doubt that the experience would be more painful than having a child. Number 6. Many women have talked online about a particular pain that they said hurt a lot more than giving birth. This pain was the dreaded gallstones. These can appear in the gallbladder when the digestive fluid is hardened. Sometimes they don't cause any pain, but when they do, they are not something a person will forget about easily. One such person described the experience like this: horrendous pain in the rib cage was radiating to the back. I was being sick and excessively sweating. Painkillers weren't touching it. In fact, we found a few women who had them and compared them to giving birth. One 46-year-old woman had this to say: "Gallstone pain is like labor pains, actually a million times worse. They came in waves, gradually getting stronger. I've never felt anything like that pain up until that point, and now I get them about 4 times a year. In the last 2 years, it's terrible, worse than having children." Okay, so that's pretty good proof that gallstones can indeed hurt more than having a kid. Now for something humanity goes to great lengths to ensure doesn't happen to many people. Number 5. As for stones, we think we need to mention them again, except this time it's when they appear in the kidneys. How much do kidney stones hurt? These little stones can cause excruciating pain in the back, the abdomen, and even the penis for men. The pain is incredibly intense in the worst cases. But don't take our word for it, listen to what former sufferers had to say about their stones. "The first stone I had felt like mini earthquakes in my lower abdomen. The pain gets so bad I projectile vomit anything, including water. I never felt such pain in all my life. It is indeed, like some say, like having a knife in your side and someone keeps twisting it." I've had many kidney stones and I'm almost 50 years old. I can tell you that the pain is unbearable and definitely worse than natural childbirth. This was the worst pain ever. I'm 52 and it was my first stone ever. I hope I never get another one. It was worse than having a baby, and I did all natural childbirth with my 2 boys. Worst pain ever. Not many people these days get the next one, but those that do are mentally scarred forever, if they make it out of the other end. Number 4. It's called tetanus, and while it might not cause acute pain as bad as some of the pains we've talked about, we think you'll agree it's up there when it comes to scary pains. You only need to see images of sufferers and you won't disagree. This bacterial infection causes the muscles to spasm, which often starts in the jaw and moves to other parts of the body. These spasms can be so intense that they break bones. The spasms happen on and off while the person has it, and it can go on for months. 25 to 30% of people that have it die from it, while the survivors go through absolute hell. According to the National Notifiable Diseases Surveillance System, from 2009 to 2017, there were 264 cases of tetanus in the USA, and 19 of those people died. In 2015, there were 209,000 cases globally, with 59,000 deaths. So while humanity has done well in vaccinating people against tetanus, it's still possible that one day you might suffer this living nightmare. If you don't believe us, listen to this. In 2009, a man described as a 25-year-old Hispanic male landscaper cut himself while pruning some bushes in the U.S. He did all the right things, tending to the wound and applying antibiotic ointment. Still, he soon ended up in the hospital, suffering from a fever and muscle aches. He then found that his jaw became very painful. Soon, he couldn't even open his mouth to eat, and it was hard to breathe. Doctors noted his muscles were spasming, so this guy was soon whisked off to intensive care and put on life support. He was one of the lucky ones, because after being given drugs such as diazepam and penicillin, he made a recovery. In 2017, a young boy from Oregon almost died after getting tetanus from a cut. NBC News wrote, he started crying and experiencing involuntary muscle spasms and clenching his jaw. Soon, he was arching his neck and suffering back and muscle contractions throughout his body. He survived, but not before those muscle spasms became very intense and he needed a ventilator to help him breathe. Suffice to say, tetanus is a terrible beast. This is what a doctor said. Because tetanus causes such severe muscle spasms, it also causes severe pain. It can also be frightening to have uncontrolled muscle spasms, especially when it's so severe. Okay, now for something run-of-the-mill, but you can't argue it doesn't deserve a place on the list. Number 3. Burns. We gotta give credit to burns. As you all know, even a minor burn can be very painful, but being on fire is another experience altogether. The strange thing is though, once the burn is so bad that it's burnt through the nerves, there's less pain. Then once the person gets help, they'll have their dressings changed, which according to some victims really is painful. One guy who was in an accident with his father explained it like this. I used to face too much pain in every dressing. I was able to see flesh on my leg. After 1.5 months, I got the graft surgery done. They took skin from my left leg, which was alright, but it gave me too much unbearable pain. Wasn't able to sleep for a week. So yeah, burns need to be here. The next thing is rare, but it sounds horrible. Number 2. Cluster headaches. While we were looking at forums where people described the pain of their burns, we found one guy who'd been burned badly but said the pain was nothing compared to cluster headaches. His actual words were, "Nothing compares to the pain of cluster headaches. The pain was so intense that I begged a nurse for morphine, heroin, ketamine, and induced coma if they had to. I have a very high pain tolerance, enough to shrug off migraines, but god damn those headaches. They made me question if life was worth living at that point." We're going to take his word for it because there are a lot of people and experts out there that put these headaches up there as one of the worst things a human being can experience. Medical websites tell us they often come in the middle of the night, waking a person up in extreme pain. They won't kill you, but they often come back time and again, usually lasting from 15 minutes to 3 hours. Britain's NHS calls them rare, but says they are excruciating attacks of pain. The internet is full of forums where people talk about these headaches, and what we've read is enough to make us pray we never get one. Here are some scary words we found. I will never forget the sheer and sudden agony which woke me up in the early hours of the morning. Someone's jabbed a white-hot poker into your eye socket and is holding it there for 45 minutes to an hour and a half. It makes you want to get up and literally run from the pain. This is why some experts have called them the worst pain known to medical science. But as you'll now see, something might beat cluster headaches in the realms of intense pain. Number 1. It's called trigeminal neuralgia. Like cluster headaches, it's something that has made people say they'd rather die than experience the pain again. It's supposed to feel like an electric shock going through the face, with attacks lasting from just a few seconds to a couple minutes. The NHS writes, people with the condition may experience attacks of pain regularly for days, weeks, or months at a time. In severe cases, attacks might happen hundreds of times a day. This is why they make life so unbearable, because they keep coming back and they can't be cured. They're caused when something called the trigeminal nerve is compressed by a blood vessel, and while there are drugs that can help, the attacks might come back. In the UK, they happen to about 10 people in 100,000. As for personal experiences, a woman in the UK said she started having about 25 attacks every day. This greatly affected her well-being. She said, "The disease had completely consumed my life. I can't brush my hair or my teeth, eat, sleep, stand in the wind, touch my face without feeling like I'm being electrocuted across my face." So, between these and cluster headaches, we really can't say which is the worst, but they both sound equally horrific. Now you need to watch Most Horrifying Punishments in the History of Mankind, or have a look at this.